We have now reached the last award of the day. It is truly an honor to bestow this award on such a deserving individual. Please turn your attention to the screens.
I've been in Washington 25 years. I've only ever worked at trade associations. I am a very lucky husband and father of 3 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife. And I think I have the best job in Washington. I love the retail industry, I love the NRF, and I can't imagine doing anything else. I feel very, very lucky to be able to do it every day.
Matt's a very competent person. He's a very good human being. And he has the courage of his convictions and the willingness to do what's really important and to take the risk to get it done.
I've known Matt for a long time. Our families have been friends for a long time, and he's been a mentor to me. He's one of these people who all of Washington looks to when they think about how to lead associations and how to advocate on behalf of businesses in this country.
Being an association leader is really a combination of a bunch of different skill sets that aren't commonly found in nature. You know, you have to run an association like a business, you have to manage a lot of people, but at the same time you have to keep your eye on all the policy objectives, and then you're also expected to be the world's greatest lobbyist. Matt's a great association executive. It's been exciting to work for him the last 10 years. He thinks about everything, he sees all the angles, and he really plays the long game.
Matt has been a consummate professional in his leadership at the National Retail Federation. Over the course of his tenure, our organization has almost tripled in size. His ability to define success for our industry on the Hill has been a critical part of our success.
So I came to the NRF as part of a search process after I'd been CEO of another association. It's hard to go back now to what the economy was like and what the industry was like in 2010. What was the unemployment rate? It was almost 10%. So our conversation really started around the narrative about job creation and the retail industry's role in creating jobs and helping shape careers and driving economic activity.
What Matt has done as an association leader is provide vision to the retail community on the big issues of the day. One of the key priorities of the National Retail Federation this year is making sure that we have a trade policy that makes sense for the American consumer. So we've worked very closely with Matt and NRF to ensure that the trade system in this country makes sense for the American consumer and American businesses.
He has managed to get the retail business, large companies and small companies, together to take a constructive but a courageous position on trade and tariffs and the things we're all dealing with now. He got out in front at a serious and a very important time.
The retail industry is actually healthy, vibrant, and growing. That message is in contrast to much of the media's coverage of what they often call a retail apocalypse. Our ability to be more front-footed in how we communicate about this wonderful industry is largely the result of Matt's incredible work with his team.
The narrative about the retail industry has been substantially transformed, and you're never finished. You know, that's a journey, not a destination. You're never done talking about the role that your industry plays. There are some standards of measure that we can look at in terms of the perception of the industry and the awareness and favorability of the National Retail Federation that are dramatically improved from where we were in 2010. Along the way, various legislative policy accomplishments, and the biggest one would be the way that the tax reform legislation turned out in 2017.
One of the highlights of my career was working on tax reform. Early on in this process, Matt understood that we needed to put a lot of resources into this fight in order to make sure that we could advance the retail industry's goals. So Matt made it happen. We found the money, we built a plan, and we went out and we won.
One of the reasons why we need to recognize association leaders is that these are the people who put their nose to the grindstone every single day to serve their membership.
You honor people because you want to create examples of folks that need to be in the association industry. We need a lot more Matts. He has a gentle way of being strong about what he's doing. He yields to other people for their experience and their success, and he shares the credit with everybody around it.
When I think of the Association Trends Executive of the Year Award, the former sports announcer Keith Jackson would say, the granddaddy of them all. I view this as a team award and recognition of the organization and the entire team. Receiving this recognition certainly is personally humbling, but it's mostly gratifying because I view this as recognition of the NRF. If we weren't accomplishing important things for our member companies, we wouldn't be receiving the recognition. And so for me, it's about the whole team, the whole staff, the industry we represent. And that part is something that I think, we're all very proud of.
I believe Matt deserves this award because of his ability to lead. His ability to lead his team, his ability to lead our industry, and candidly, his ability to lead our board. Congratulations, my friend. Very well deserved.
Matt, on behalf of your colleagues here at the National Retail Federation, and certainly from me personally, congratulations. This award is very well deserved.
Matt, congratulations. We're all proud of you.
Matt, you're a great leader, you're a great person, and you're somebody that young executives can learn from, and so can old ones. I love watching what you do.
Well, that was terrific. I haven't said anything yet, and you're already standing up. I don't know if that means you want me to leave and you hope it's finished, or you're glad. That video was terrific and unexpected. It's the first time you see this is when you sit in the chair and watch it. And so one thought comes to mind is the Sally Field line. You like me. You really, really like me. I'd rather be, and I think we are, respected, but it's also nice to be liked. And I appreciate that very much. And I want to thank Association Trends, of course, Joel and team, and Brittany, who phoned me and gave me the news that day and then immediately went out on maternity leave. But Brittany, thank you for the call. The past winners and honorees, so I know, play a role in this process. You never know what you're going to get with an introduction, and the video was fabulous. So, Mike, thank you, and Tom and David. David and I have a long history together. As Mike said, he and I and Jill and Allison have been friends for a long time and watch each other kids. And, Mike, your success is really remarkable to watch, too. So thank you for being part of this. And, Tom, you've been a great friend and a supporter and a champion and taken a couple chances with me. So thank you for that. I'll come back and pick on you a little bit more later in the remarks, but that's just the opening line. I do have a couple special guests that I want to announce and introduce, and it reminds me of a story that Robert Mueller told me when he and I shared a stage a couple of years ago. It was before he was in his current position, so no subpoenas for me. I wasn't deposed or anything like that. But he was finished with his tenure as the director of the FBI, and I introduced him, and we were on stage together. And he told a story after I introduced him of inviting General Colin Powell, then Secretary of State Powell, to speak to a group of senior FBI agents and executives at the Hoover Building in the big auditorium over there. And General Powell was a couple of minutes behind schedule, and Director Mueller was sort of filibustering to use a little bit of time. And he looked up into the right-hand corner of the auditorium, and he saw the security detail for the secretary come in. He saw General Powell striding purposefully down the side aisles. And he thought, well, he doesn't want to screw around here with a long, bunch of conversation, so he wants me to just get to it. So as he just got near the stage and he was close to the rise, he was going to walk up, Director Mueller said, and now, please join me in welcoming a man who needs no introduction, Secretary of State Colin Powell. And so he crossed the stage, they shook hands, he waited for Mueller to sit down, he stood at the podium, he looked over, he said, just because I don't need one doesn't mean I don't want one. So we all like them when we get them. I got a great one, thank you for that. My longtime friend Rick Corcoran is here, who's done great work with me both at IFA and at the NRF. So Rick, thanks for being here. And many of you know Rick. I was introduced by Tom and Suzanne to Rick many years ago. And the man who's probably more responsible for my being on this stage than anyone else, Don DeBolt, who was my longtime collaborator and mentor at the IFA, who was the IFA CEO for 10 years, who inherited me and did the best he could with me when he found out what he had. And Don, I hope you think it turned out okay. And my parents, mom and dad, Gretchen and Roger Shay, are here and came back to celebrate this. We just celebrated my mom's 80th birthday last weekend, so she's got to see me again. She's trying to catch up with Dad. He's only 86. So years ago, Mom was up on the stage with me when we the IFA Legal Symposium. And just as an aside, we used to hold the Legal Symposium in May, and every once in a while it fell on Mother's Day. And so I used to get grief from all these lawyers who said, you must not care about Mother's Day. So one year, to shut up these 600 lawyers, I just flew her out. And so I said, Mom, can you come up here? And she came up and said, he loves his mother. He's a good boy. She gave me a kiss, and she sat down. And she stayed up in the presidential suite, right? It was great fun. It was probably 1998 or 9, something like that. And then, of course, my immediate family, Matthew was ready to walk up here when he heard the cue music. He's like, not for you. But the kids, I think we have a picture that I just wanted to throw up there because we're missing the oldest. So the oldest daughter, Pearson, is not here because she has a test to take because it's spring break tomorrow. The youngest daughter, Tally, is here because she has a test to take this afternoon. She doesn't want to take it. Right, Miss Curley's class. We don't like science with her, do we? And the middle guy, Matthew, who is actually on spring break, just wishes he were home playing Fortnite right now, right? So thank you all for being here, for your support. I wouldn't be up here, Allison, without you for sure, to help me do the things that we do together. So, and you guys, thanks for tolerating me when I'm here in a way and distracted sometimes. Conference call last night at 8 o'clock. But as I said in the video, I guess I didn't remember I said that. I really do think of this as the granddaddy of them all. If you look at the winners, this is the 40th year. You think of the organizations and the executives that have been recognized over the years, many of whom are here today. When I got the call, the first thing I thought was they must be desperate for nominees. But I was pleased and proud, and I told Brittany I would accept, but only on the condition that we recognize this really was a team award. And all of us that have jobs like this one know that we get to stand up frequently and take credit for the work that other people do. And I try never to forget that. And we have a great team at the NRF, and I've got many of my colleagues here seated with us just at the table behind. And I don't want to leave anybody out, but Carlene and David and Lisa and Susan and Ellen and Stephanie and Mary is here, and Bill and Judy and Brandy. So thank you for coming to represent all of our great colleagues who do all the work that make this all possible. I know that you guys do the real work, and I stand up, and hopefully when you get it wrong, I get the blame, but frequently you get the blame when you get it wrong, and I get the credit when you get it right. So I sat next to a past honoree, Steve Anderson, on Monday at lunch, himself a hat trick CEO, 3 CEO jobs, one of the few hat trick CEOs in town. Nobody holds that against you. And Steve leaned over, and we're sitting with a bunch of CEOs, and he said, so have you started writing your speech? And I said, my speech? And he said, your Trends speech, have you started the speech yet? I said, well, I got some thoughts. I'm thinking about a couple things. I said, well, Steve, when did you start your speech? He said, well, I started about 10 years before I got the award. Which I think is probably what a lot of CEOs do, and a lot of current folks in this room. There's probably a couple futures sitting around here. So I don't have a speech per se, but I just want to share a couple thoughts. And I thought I would share a little bit about maybe the journey and how I got here. As Gayatri said, and congratulations, Gayatri, on all your success. I'm glad you've been welcomed by the association community. You've done so well, so congratulations. But as she pointed out, I think very correctly, there's not really a straight line to an association career, and I don't think there's a straight line to a job like this one. So a little bit about the journey, and then maybe a couple thoughts about why I love the association world so much, and then a few lessons from some of the people from whom I've learned good lessons that I try to keep in mind every day. And there are a lot of reasons that I'm here, and I think along the way, the journey, I've certainly been blessed with great people like Chris Baldwin, who's our chairman, and other CEOs and search committees and boards of directors and member companies. And that's been a great blessing, and the support of many people in this room. But the real reason I think I'm in the association business is because I hated law school. I absolutely hated law school. And when I got out of college, it was the end of another recession when the unemployment rate was about 10%. That was in 1982-83, which as a college kid I was completely oblivious to because my parents were sending me to a private school, and when you're a sophomore, junior in high school, the unemployment rate is 10% somewhere else. You're not thinking about that, right? You're going to class and you're going to the fraternity parties. But when I graduated, I was supposed to go to Colorado skiing with my 3 best friends, and I thought, I'd like to do that, but if I do that, my dad is going to have to subsidize me for a year while I go skiing, and he's got 3 more children behind me and my younger siblings, and he's got to pay for them to go to private schools, and it wouldn't be fair for him to subsidize me for a year to go skiing. So I should do the responsible thing and go to law school, where he subsidized me for 3 years. And I managed to get myself into the bottom of the class after my first year, and I spent 2.5 more years digging myself back up into the top and getting onto the law review and cleaning up my own mess. But I really didn't like law school. And so in my final year, in my 3rd year, we went through the drill, and you interview with law firms, and you're a summer associate, and someone gives you an offer, and you accept it because, like lemmings, that's what all law students do, because you're supposed to do that, and you've been poor for 7 years or more, and you want a real job. So I accepted an offer. And then in the spring, I took a course to get me out of the law school called legislative planning. And legislative planning included an internship at the state capitol with Phil Sorensen, younger brother of Ted Sorensen, Ted Sorensen being one of JFK's counsel. And it was a fascinating course, and you had to do an internship 3 or 4 days down the street at the state capitol. And I worked, coincidentally, for the Ohio Council of Retail Merchants, and there were people around the Capitol in 1987, like John Kasich and John Boehner and Hobson and Gilmore. Lots of, we think Sherrod Brown was the Secretary of State, Dick Celeste was governor, Mike DeWine was there, George Voinovich was almost the governor, all these people that ended up in Washington. And it was fascinating, and I thought I would rather do this than be a lawyer. So I called the law firm June or July, and I said, I can't take the job. I'm sorry, I have to rescind the offer. And they said, well, you can't. It's too late. You accepted 8 months ago. You've got to do it. We can't find another lawyer at this. I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And the last phone call I had with his partner, he called and he said, you're going to regret this. This will be the biggest mistake of your professional career. You're going to regret this the whole life. And he hung up on me. And at that moment, as I hung up the phone, I knew it was the best decision I could have ever made. And I turned down $65,000 a year, which is a lot of money now. It was a lot more money then. And I took a job making $22,000 a year because it was something I wanted to do. And I knew I loved that interesting intersection of politics and policy and representing companies and shaping outcomes. And that little bit I knew about associations way back then, 30 years ago, was enough to get me interested and say, I love this, maybe damning with faint praise. I love it more than being a lawyer. But it looked exciting and it looked interesting, and that was my strange way of getting into the association world, because there's not a straight path. And that led to a job. And that ultimately led to opportunities, and that brought me to Washington 4 or 5 years later. And as I've been in the association world now for all these 30 years, and it's all I've ever done, other than the college jobs that we had as bartenders and cooks and whatever else we did to get through school, I realized there are many things I love about associations, and there are obvious ones. The obvious ones of the experiences that we've had, and certainly Allison and I have been very blessed with the people that we've been surrounded by and the relationships we've created. And other than joining the Navy, I don't think I could have done 100 international trips in the last 25 years. I mean, there are things that you have opportunities to do that would have never been available to me anywhere else. But as I think about the things I really love, there are really, I think, 3 things about the association world that I love and have come to appreciate the longer I've been in the association world. And the first is really the diversity of the association world. And by that, I mean 2 kinds of diversity. One is the diversity of the work, the challenges, the opportunities, the things that come across your desk every day, as David alluded to in the video, the chance to wear multiple hats, to lead a business, to try to build an organization, to work with a team, to do strategic planning, to recruit members, to do sales and marketing, but always to remember, at least in our business, the job number 1 is advocacy and public policy. And as Chris alluded to in the video, to try to forge some sort of consensus out of what can be very diverse opinions. And when you've got Walmart and Amazon and Target and Tractor Supply and Neiman Marcus and Dominion Jewelers and Single Units and the largest, it's interesting, it's fun, it's challenging, it's rewarding, but that kind of diversity can be really, really satisfying professionally. But the other kind of diversity that I think I appreciate much more now than I did 10 or 5 years ago even, is the diversity of the people. And the fact that the association community creates opportunities for people from wherever they're from, women, minorities, members of the LGBT community. The association world is welcome and is opening, and I think I had my eyes open to that more than anywhere else during my time as chairman of ASAE last year, part of the Matt Shay Overexposure Tour. And, but standing there in Toronto in the summer of 2017, when those terrible events took place in Charlottesville, not that far from here, and I had a speech written and stood up that day and said, we have to throw this out, and Katie McBreen will remember when, when I walked on stage, or John Graham might, when the teleprompters went black, and they thought, what did he do now? But we couldn't stand up and say what we were going to say. We had to make a statement about diversity and really acknowledge that diversity is a strength, and it should be celebrated, and it should be lifted up. It's not a weakness that's diminished and denigrated. And that's one of the things I love about the association world, is that we embrace diversity, and we recognize that diverse organizations are more successful, and we certainly try to do that at the NRF every single day. I think the other thing I love about this, and Jay, past honoree, Jay Timmons and I were just speaking about this a minute ago, is that it's a meritocracy. I mean, if you think about not needing to go to the right college or have the right degree or have the right family connections, you can be part of the association world and the association community and find a place for yourself. Jay and I were joking that it is a meritocracy, and sometimes there's even room for guys like us. So it's a meritocracy that even works in our favor once in a while. But if you work hard, and if you take advantage of the fact, as Gayatri mentioned, that most associations will never have the resources they wish they had to do the things they want to do. And I'm sure, Tom and Mike and Tom and people with Dawn, people with hundreds of millions of dollars would all acknowledge there's always more we'd like to do that we can't get done. And if you're a person that wants to take on new challenges and wants new opportunities and wants the chance for growth and development, you can find that in an association, because there's always someone willing to give you more work and let you do it. And you can advance and you can find a career path there. And that's something I love about the association world. And I guess the third thing is just simply the opportunity to have an impact. And the obvious impact that we talk about and the scorecard that we use to measure success is advocacy. And that's the number one job. As the old Ford commercial was, it's job number one. And we never forget that. But if you look around the room, or if you come to the ASAE Summit Awards dinner in October, John, shameless commercial, Steve, someone tell me the date, you'll see the organizations that get celebrated and the programs that get celebrated, and they're not about advocacy. They're programs about creating opportunities in the workplace, creating opportunities for underserved communities. And even the things like Mike is doing with Generation Energy and Tom and company doing with Howard University. There are things that associations do every single day that have nothing to do directly with advocacy. Maybe indirectly we can connect the dots. That's why we do some of these things. But a lot of them are just things that make our country and our communities better places. And that's why associations have an impact. And I guess that's the reason I really love being at an association. It's an opportunity to have an impact that I'm not sure if I were a lawyer, and I love lawyers, but if the path not taken, if I'd have taken that path, I don't know. But this has been enormously rewarding. So those are just a few of the reasons I love associations. And I guess some of the things, just a couple of quick things that I've learned from people, some in this room. The first one I learned standing up on this stage years ago was, and Don and I were talking about this a minute ago with David, was just using your own voice. Don't try to be someone else. I followed someone who had the job that I had at the IFA, and I spent a couple of years trying to do things the way that person had done them, and it didn't work out very well. And it got better when I realized I needed to have my own voice. But it really came home for me in, I think it was 2011 in January at the first NRF convention when I had to do the State of the Industry address. And we now have about 40,000 people at our convention in New York. Then we were maybe 25,000. And the big room is set, 5,000 people. There's a few tables like this in the front, and then it's just rows of theater style. Big stage, big jumbotrons. and a bigger staff. And at IFA, I'd written all my own speeches, done all my own remarks, and this staff at NRF was trying to help me. It was Scott and some other people. And Allison and I walked in on a Monday morning at 7 a.m. for a couple of quick rehearsals before the doors open at 8:30. Cue the music, the staff is at a table, they've got walkie-talkies and papers, and they see Allison, and they look over and like, the spouse is here. They didn't even invite her. The body language was, don't sit at our table, we're professionals. So she has her coffee, and she sits down at the round table right next to her. It was like, mistake number one, do not mess with the spouse. But they violated that rule. So I walked out on stage, and I started, and they have the teleprompters on, and I got about a fourth of the way, I don't know, fourth of the way, third of the way through the speech, and it just went sideways. And so they said, okay, let's try it over. I walked off, and Allison looked over and took a sip and said, turn off the teleprompter. And I walked off, came back on, same thing, falls apart. She takes another drink, she goes, turn off the teleprompter. At this point, the head of communications is like swatting a fly to get, he's like, I hear a sound, but I don't know what it is. So it happens again, the third time, she's turn off the teleprompter. So finally, I think his face reddened, and he's like, okay. Matt, let's try this one more time. Let's just turn off the teleprompter. Turn off the teleprompter, walked out, 15 minutes, all the way through start to finish. They look over. She goes, I told you. Which is the secret weapon. But I think it goes to that, you have to use your own voice, right? You have to be authentic. And, we want our heroes, and I'm not suggesting I'm one, but we want people to be themselves. And we expect them to have flaws, and that's okay. That's part of why we love them. Whether it's in our politicians, elected leaders, wherever they are, people, they know what's authentic and they know what's not. And authenticity matters, and that's why you have to speak in your own voice and be yourself. And that's a lesson that sometimes took me a little longer to learn, but I think I try to embrace that whenever I can. So in May of 2010, I had just accepted this job, and my phone rang one day, and it said, Mr. Shay? I said, yes. And this woman said, you're having lunch with Mr. Donahue next Tuesday, the 23rd, in his office. Please be here at noon. And now, maybe it was more of an invitation than that. It sounded like an ultimatum to me, but 10 days into the new job, so I said, okay. So I went over. I'm game. I'm going to learn. One of the things that's very different about that video than when 10 years ago, the unemployment rate was higher, but also I had a hell of a lot more hair. And so when I went over to see Tom, it was never quite that good. But so I went over. You got the white tornado and you got Mr. Clean. So I went over and I sat down, and Tom and I had lunch. And he said, so tell me the difference between the IFA, the Franchise Association, where you've been for 17 years, and the NRF. I said, well, overlap on policy issues, some membership overlap, structure of the business is about the same, membership dues, conferences, policy and advocacy is number one. Let's see, we have 25 staff, NRF is about 75, IFA is about 12 million, NRF is 27. So, I don't know, a lot of similarities, except maybe the NRF is 2 or 3 times bigger than the IFA, depending on how you count. And Tom said, no, you're wrong. I said, yeah, I am wrong. I'm wrong. I can do the math. I'm not wrong. I can do the math. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. I'm like, I'm wrong. He's like, you're wrong. I'm like, I'm wrong. Okay, I'm wrong. He goes, it's way bigger than that. And I said, it's way bigger. I'm like, okay, at this point, I know I need to be taught a lesson. So I said, okay, so how's it bigger? He said, okay, you look at the Wall Street Journal? I said, yes. You watch CNBC? I said, yes. Okay, you pick up the Wall Street Journal every day for 2 weeks. How often does franchising get mentioned? I don't know, once. CNBC, 2 weeks? Once. You pick up the Wall Street Journal every day. How often is retail mentioned? Every day? More than once? CNBC, every day? More than once? He said, it's not how big the organization is. It's a platform. The industry is a platform. Use it as a platform. And that's a lesson that I've taken to heart, and I think about it as a platform. So when we deliver messages, we try to lean into the platform of the retail industry, not be constrained by whether we have 12 million or 27 million or now 65 million. It doesn't matter because, as I said before, there's never enough. 250 million isn't enough. You always want more. Scale is a good, in my view, it's a good thing. But if you don't have scale, you still have a platform, and you have to use it the right way. And that was one of the things that Tom taught me a long time ago, and I have tried to remember it. Before there was Tom, there was a guy named George Cook, who was a legendary trade association executive, and from 1965 to 1990, he was the CEO of the Grocery Manufacturers of America. And George was coincidentally a Cincinnati boy, and he worked at the Ohio Council of Retail Merchants in the early 60s before he came to Washington. So he and I were alumni of the same finishing school. And I got to know George pretty well over the years in the late 80s and through the 90s. And I asked George about running a trade association, and I said, well, tell me how you think about this and how you talk to your team. And he said, you know, I have people on my team that think we're a nonprofit. And those were the days in which there were good old boys clubs, there were social clubs. You know, Don, even when Don and I were at the IFA, there were conventions in Hawaii and conventions in, you know, Acapulco and Puerto Rico. And those days are done, I think, now. But George said to me, Matt, we run this place like we're a nonprofit organization one day a year. And that's the day we file our tax returns. And every other day of the year, we're a for-profit business. And I've probably said that 100 times to our staff. And it's more true today than ever. And George was ahead of his time. But the truth is, you have to run your association like it's a business, not only because you have a bottom line, but because your members, your clients, can go somewhere else and get a better product if you don't deliver it. And they look at their budgets, and they're going to pick the best. They don't care if you're an association or not. So George was way ahead of his time. And I think that's something that we have tried to be faithful to as well as we think about how we manage our members' equity at the NRF. My good friend, Doc's good friend, Don, is here, but Doc could not be here. Doc Cohen was the chairman of the board at the Franchise Association, and I think Don, he probably had every job you could have at the IFA. He's chair of the finance committee, chair of the franchisee advisory council, chair of the foundation, and unfortunately is a very successful franchisee, lives in Houston, has pneumonia, and couldn't be here today. But Doc taught me a lot of things over the years while he was on our board at the IFA. And at an event like this one, in his honor, some years ago, he came off the stage after being recognized, and I said, Doc, congratulations on all your successes. And he said, Matthew, the last thing I did by myself was hire my first employee. Everything after that I've done as a team. And that was one of those moments when you really sort of put in your place, because you realize as much as you want to stand up and think you're great, even a guy like this, he had hundreds of franchise units. At some point, he had more than 1,000 employees. He bought and sold his company back and forth to the franchisor multiple times. He's got 6,000 bottles of wine in his cellar. Not that I've spent any time there, but an enormously successful guy. And Doc was still humble enough to recognize that he didn't do any of it by himself. He did it with his team, and it began with the first step he took when he hired his first employee. So that's a lesson I try not to forget. And then my friend Don, who I said inherited me and had to make the best he could out of me, we got along very well. We had a great relationship. There was a little interregnum there for a couple of years when I had the ears of some of the big companies who were involved in public policy, and I think a couple of years where I didn't serve Don as well as I could have. And it all came to a head at a convention, and Don will remember this, in 1999 at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And Don got blindsided by something that shouldn't have happened, and I could have helped avoid it. And he called me up to his suite after a meeting with the executive committee, and he said, Matt, I should probably fire you for this. And I agreed with him. Unfortunately, he was right. And he said, here's the deal. If you want to get with the program, you got to stop thinking about what's in your interests. You're the government relations guy, that's fine. It's not only about you, your issues, your department. It's about what's best for the association. And if you can do what's best for the association and put that first and foremost and not think about your parochial little piece of it, you can be successful. And I tried to do that to the best of my ability, and 6 months later, Don wrote a memo to the executive committee, a copy of which I have to this day, that said to them, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you should make Matt the CEO. I've done a complete 180 on him. He's turned it around. And that was because he taught me, it's not about the little piece of what you do, it's about the big picture. And as much of a superstar, rock star you think you might be in your little area, that piece alone isn't enough to get it done. So that was a great lesson. And I guess the last thing I learned, I call the Roger Farah breakfast. And Roger Farah at that time was essentially the CEO of Ralph Lauren. He made billions of dollars for Ralph, running the company for Ralph for about 12 years. And he was on the search committee that hired me. He went on to become the CEO of Tory Burch because Tory needed someone that knew how to work with a founder, and now he's the chair of the board of Tiffany's, and he's on bank boards. An incredibly intelligent guy, a lovely friend of mine and Allison's, and a terrific guy. And I was trying to go see him on a trip to New York about 5 years ago, and I'd been talking to Bridget, his assistant, who Carlene remembers, and I kept saying, well, I'm going to fly up on an 8 or 9 o'clock shuttle, so can I see Roger for breakfast or for lunch or for early afternoon or maybe a late morning meeting? And she called back and she said, listen, Roger's only free if you can meet him at 8:30 tomorrow morning at the Pierre Hotel for breakfast. He would love to do that. And I said, I did the math. I got to get up at 4:30 to get to 6 o'clock shuttle. I'm not doing that. So I said, nope, sorry, I can't do it. I hung up the phone. And I was driving Matthew to a baseball practice. And I kept driving, and I thought, what an idiot I am. I mean, Roger's going to have, he's a great guy. I mean, why would you not get up at 4:30 to go do this? So I got up, and I went, and we had a great breakfast. And just coincidentally, and this honestly had nothing to do with it, he was still on the compensation committee, but it led to a conversation that turned into something very positive. That was not what, I would have never raised it, but he thought of something that if I had not been there, the 80% of life is showing up. If I hadn't been there, we would have never had that discussion, and it wouldn't have changed it out. And Carlene knows this part. It wouldn't have happened. And Rick Corcoran and I saw a speaker some years ago. Bert Jacobs, one of the guys the two brothers that founded Life is Good. You know, the Life is Good. You see them on the backs of tires on Jeeps and the T-shirts. These guys have a $100 million business out of Life is Good, and it is good. And Bert was a speaker at our convention one year. And he was talking about a similar sort of, I felt like I had to do this. Oh, I had to get up and get on a shuttle at 4:30 to go see Roger. And he said, you don't have to do it. You get to do it. You get to do this. Whatever it is you do, you get to do it. And Rick and I talk about this all the time. Every time we have an email, it's keep the faith, hang in there, and we get to do this because we get to do it. And I guess that's a lesson that it's easy to say, I get to be the CEO of this great successful trade association, but there are things we all do in our lives, in our work lives, in our private lives, that I think sometimes cause us to, for a minute maybe, think, I can't believe I have to do this. And I think a lot of life is, I get to do this. And looking at it that way, makes a big difference. You get to do that, Matthew. You do not get to play Fortnite tonight. So, listen, that turning down the $22,000, taking 22 and turning down 65, the road not taken thing, the Robert Frost poem, I think is a little tricky. Robert Frost wrote that poem really for a friend, an Englishman who was a poet, who always agonized over his decisions and second-guessed everything and thought about the road that he hadn't taken. And we all think of it as the road not taken poem. The poem is actually called A Walk in the Woods. And the joke is that Frost thought, if you're going to take a walk in the woods, you get to do it. It's just a walk in the woods. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And so, I think, whether you take 65 or 22 or you choose this path or another path, as long as you appreciate that you get to do it, you're going to have a good walk. And I guess what I would say to this next generation of association leaders that we saw up here today is I hope that for you, I hope that you'll find the association field as diverse and rewarding and challenging and fulfilling as I have. And I hope for us, we get to keep doing this for a very, very long time because I do love what I get to do and the people I get to do it with. And I hope for all of you that you'll recognize that you get to do it and that you enjoy the walk. So thank you all very much.